Before this story continues, please allow me to say one important thing clearly. The story you are about to hear is a work of fiction created for entertainment and educational purposes. It explores toxic family dynamics and their emotional impact within the context of United States military life and military families. All characters, ranks, units, events, and situations are entirely fictional and do not represent or refer to any real individual military unit or organization within the U.S. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, or Coast Guard. This content may be supported by AI tools during the creative process. It does not depict real events, does not disclose military information, and does not promote violence, hatred, or harm of any kind. The story is told with respect for core American military values, including honor, discipline, responsibility, and human dignity. It is designed to be advertiser-friendly and compliant with YouTube community policies. If you are a woman who has ever stood quietly behind a military family carrying more than anyone noticed, please stay until the end. And if this story reaches you, share your thoughts in the comments, or follow the channel to continue walking with stories made for strong hearts that are rarely heard. My name is Harper. I am 25. I work out of Fort Cavazos in Killeen, Texas, and until last October I believed I understood the difference between endurance and loyalty. I came home unannounced on a Friday afternoon, the kind of day when the air in Temple smells like dust and cut grass, and the television hums low because someone forgot to turn it off. My mother Linda was at the sink. She had her sleeves rolled up and both hands in soapy water like she was trying to disappear into a chore. I saw the bruise before she saw me. It was new, darker than the old ones she said came from cabinets. Her fingers shook when she set a plate on the rack. She did not turn around right away. When she did, she smiled too fast and said my name like it was a surprise she had rehearsed. "Do not worry about me," she said. The words landed exactly where they always did. Not as comfort, as instruction. I stood there and let the kitchen sounds keep going. The faucet, the clink of porcelain, the small television talking to no one. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. I did not need to look to know something had shifted. When I did, it was a story post from an account I did not follow but recognized immediately. Mark, my stepfather. He was on a yacht somewhere bright. OSAKA was tagged in clean white letters. He wore sunglasses and held a glass like it weighed nothing. A woman leaned into his shoulder, young enough to be mistaken for confidence. The caption said, "Life is short." I felt the room tilt. Not because of the woman, not even because of the trip, but because I knew where that money came from. The joint account. The one my mother still asked permission to use when she needed refills. The one that declined last month at the pharmacy. I did not raise my voice. I did not confront him. I did not even show my mother the screen. I watched her dry her hands on a towel she had already used and fold it twice like neatness could protect her. Something old and steady settled in my chest. Mark liked receipts. He liked paper. He liked telling people that real work left calluses and that everything else was noise. That was fine. Receipts work both ways. I had learned that early. I kissed my mother on the cheek and told her I would be back soon. She nodded like relief and fear shared the same chair. In the car, the engine idled while I scrolled back through the post and saved it. Not for anger, for sequence. I thought about how often women are told to keep families calm by swallowing their own reactions. I thought about how silence is sold as strength until it costs too much. I did not plan revenge. I planned process. Paper trail, no contact, financial boundaries, exposure at the right table with the right people present. Justice does not need volume. It needs patience. If you have ever swallowed your anger to keep a family calm, hit like so I know I am not alone. I put the phone face down and drove back toward the base, already aware that Mark had no idea what I actually did for a living or who I answered to, or how much damage a clean record can do when it starts to speak. The house did not change after I left for the base, which was its own kind of warning. Same porch light that flickered when the wind picked up. Same doormat Linda shook out every Sunday like ritual could erase dust. When I came back the next evening, Mark was already home, boots by the door lined up like a display television tuned to a sports channel he did not watch so much as let run. He looked up once and smiled the way men do when they think they are being generous. "You can stay a couple nights," he said like I was passing through. "Guest rules, though." He said it lightly with a shrug, but the word landed and stayed. Guest in my house. Linda's house had become his sentence. I did not correct him. I set my bag down and nodded because I had learned a long time ago that correcting Mark never corrected anything. Dinner was meatloaf and green beans, the kind of meal that announces normalcy to neighbors through open windows. Evan arrived late, keys jingling his new car parked right where Linda used to pull in. Mark tossed him the remote and asked about classes, about tuition, about the parking permit he had paid for because the campus was safer that way. Evan talked with his mouth full and did not notice when Linda flinched at the sound of Mark's fork on the plate. When Mark turned to me, it was to ask if I was still doing that desk job. "Paper soldier?" he said, not unkindly in his own mind. He laughed. "I did real work. My hands paid for this place." I watched Linda's fingers tighten around her napkin. I did not defend myself. I noticed the way Mark's eyes flicked to Evan after the joke, like approval needed a witness. After dinner, Mark spread receipts on the table, Evan's books, Evan's insurance, Evan's phone upgrade. He waved me off before I could offer to help clear the plates. "You're strong, Harper. You'll figure it out." That was his version of fairness, strength as a reason to withhold. Later in the kitchen, Linda whispered that she was proud of me. She always said it when Mark could not hear, as if pride were contraband. On Sunday, we went to church. Mark shook hands, slapped backs, accepted praise for a donation he liked to mention without mentioning. Linda smiled beside him, chin lifted, bruise hidden under makeup applied too carefully. A woman from the PTA asked if Evan was still commuting. Mark said he bought him the car because family comes first. I stood there and felt like a piece of furniture that had been moved once and forgotten. After service, Mark talked about values in the parking lot, about responsibility, about how kids these days needed direction. When I mentioned my schedule, he interrupted to tell a story about a job site where men bled for their pay. "Paper cuts do not count," he said, grinning. I smiled because smiling kept the peace, and peace was the currency in that family. Back at the house, Linda went to the bedroom and came out with a small bottle. "Vitamins," she said, explaining before anyone asked. Mark took it from her and turned it over, reading the label like a ledger. "Did you need these?" he asked. She nodded. He checked the receipt on the counter and put the bottle back with a sigh that suggested generosity. That moment did something to me. Not loudly. It was the quiet snap of a thread pulled too far. I had seen men control rooms with less. That night, Evan asked if I could help him move a couch. Mark told him to wait, that he would get the truck tomorrow. He did not look at me when he said it. I watched Linda fold laundry into small, exact squares, apologizing to no one. The next morning, Mark mentioned the Osaka trip like a footnote, a work thing that just happened. He did not say the woman's name. He did not need to. He said travel expenses were complicated and waved his hand when Linda asked about the account balance. I listened. I counted the seconds between questions and answers. I noticed how often Mark used we when he meant I. At breakfast, he told Evan he would cover the last of the semester. When Evan left, Mark told me I should consider something steadier, a nice office somewhere, less strain. He smiled like advice was a gift. I thought about how often women are told to choose smaller lives to keep larger men comfortable. I swallowed the response that rose. I had learned that silence here was not agreement. It was inventory. That afternoon, a neighbor stopped by with a casserole and a question about the church fundraiser. Mark accepted the dish and the praise. Linda stood behind him and nodded. When the door closed, she asked if she could pick up refills on the way to the doctor. Mark asked for the card back at the end of the sentence, already reaching. I watched her hand it over. I felt heat rise and settle. I did not speak. I went for a walk instead, past lawns trimmed to regulation length, past mailboxes painted the same color. The town looked exactly like itself. That night, Mark sat at the table with his laptop open, numbers reflected in his glasses. He asked me what I actually did all day. I said I worked with systems. He laughed and said, "Systems break." I said nothing. The quiet stretched until he filled it with a joke about real work again. Linda watched me, waiting to see if I would push back. I did not. I kissed her cheek and told her I would be out early. In my room, I made notes in my head. Words, dates, who said what and when. It was not anger that kept me awake. It was recognition. This was not a single bruise. It was a structure, and structures fall the same way they are built, one piece at a time. If you have ever lived in a house where everything had to be approved, comment, "I see you." I left the house before dawn and drove back toward Fort Cavazos, while the sky was still deciding what color it wanted to be. The road was quiet in that way that makes your thoughts louder. By the time I pulled through the gate, my face had settled into the neutral expression that passes for readiness. Routine helps. It always has. PT came first. A familiar cadence. Breath measured. Muscles warm. Pain that made sense because it followed rules. After that, the day moved in clean lines. Brief at 0700. Taskings handed down without drama. Emails stacked and sorted by priority. At the CQ desk later, I logged names and times and watched the clock tick with purpose. This was the part of my life Mark never saw. Not because it was secret, but because it was disciplined. At mid-morning, I forwarded an email chain that had come in overnight and flagged a line that mattered. No commentary, just a note that said "for awareness." It was answered in minutes. That did not surprise me. People think the military is loud. It is not. It is quiet until it needs to be precise. Reyes passed my desk and nodded. He had the look of someone who has seen systems fail and learned how to keep people safe anyway. Paper trail saves people, he said, not stopping. He did not need to explain. He never did. I filed the phrase away like a tool I already knew how to use. During lunch, I called my mother and asked about her day without asking questions that would raise alarms. She said she was fine. She said Mark was busy. I told her about a doctor appointment I needed to reschedule. She asked if I needed help. The habit ran deep. I told her I had it covered. In the afternoon, I walked to the office where Kate worked. Victim advocate is a title that sounds heavier than the room itself. No flags, no slogans, just chairs arranged to invite honesty. Kate spoke the way people do when they know silence can be kinder than advice. I told her I was asking generally. Hypothetical. She did not smile at that. She asked who was safe and who needed to be. We talked through options without urgency. Safety plan first. Who to call, where to go, how to document without escalating. No contact orders explained without pressure. She made sure I understood what not to do as much as what to do. Do not surprise him. Do not argue in hallways. Do not tell her everything at once. People panic when you move too fast. That mattered. When I left, she handed me a card and said she would be available if the conversation changed shape. The day stayed steady until late afternoon when my phone rang with a number that did not display a name. I stepped into the stairwell and answered. "Yes, sir," I said, because that was the correct response. The voice on the other end asked a simple question about a timeline. I answered with facts only. No color, no speculation. The call lasted less than a minute. When it ended, I leaned against the wall and listened to the hum of the building. No one around me reacted. No one needed to. Back at my desk, a message popped up confirming something that would not be public until the following week. I did not share it. I noted it. Access is not about power. It is about restraint. On the drive back toward Temple, I thought about the difference between asking permission and building capacity. Linda had spent years asking. Mark had spent years approving. Neither prepared her for independence. At home, the television was on again. Mark talked on the phone in the living room, voice warm, promising things that cost other people effort. He hung up and asked how my day was. I said it was fine. He nodded and said good, then mentioned Evan needed money for a lab fee. He said it casually, already assuming the answer. I watched Linda reach for her purse and stop herself. I asked if she wanted to walk with me around the block. Mark said he would handle it. Linda followed me outside anyway, hands tucked into her sleeves. She asked if everything was all right. I told her yes and meant not yet. That night I logged onto my laptop and reviewed bank statements the way anyone can. No tricks, just attention. Transfers lined up with dates, amounts rounded in ways that suggested planning. I did not confront. I did not print. I saved copies to a folder with a name that meant nothing. The next morning at PT, Reyes asked if I was good. I said I was working a problem. He said, "Keep it clean." I said, "Always." Later I overheard a conversation about a compliance review scheduled for later in the month. I already knew the date. That was another breadcrumb. Not a reveal, a reminder. Back at the CQ desk, I drafted an email and deleted it twice before sending the version that asked a narrow question to the right office. The reply came back with an attachment and a single line. "For your situational awareness." I closed the file and breathed out slowly. When I stopped by Kate again, I told her the shape of the situation had changed. She did not ask why. She updated the plan: small steps, safe steps, document dates, keep communications brief. If he threatens your career, save it. If he asks for a meeting, decline. No contact means no contact. On Sunday, Mark went to church alone. Linda stayed home with a headache. He called it a shame. I called it information. In the afternoon, Evan stopped by and asked if I could spot him some cash. Mark had said yes already, he said, but needed time. I told him I could not. He looked surprised, then annoyed. Strength, he repeated like a lesson he had learned wrong. That night, I packed my bag. Not to leave forever, just to change the geometry. At the base, lights stayed on late. I finished my shift and sent one last email before signing out. The reply came back after midnight. A short acknowledgement, nothing else. The kind of answer that tells you are on the right road without telling you where it ends. If you have served, you know discipline is not about being rigid, it is about keeping people alive. The OSAKA post stayed online longer than I expected, bright and careless, like Mark wanted witnesses. I did not comment. I did not ask questions out loud. I opened the joint account the way anyone could and followed the dates backward. No tricks, no shortcuts, just statements and timing. The transfer that paid for the flight landed 2 days after a deposit Mark had labeled reimbursement. The amount was rounded. That matters. Rounded numbers mean planning. I saved the page and closed the tab. When I drove to see my mother, she was folding towels into the same small squares, apologizing to the room as if the air demanded it. I sat with her and asked about her doctor appointment. She said she rescheduled because the card had declined. I did not tell her why yet. People do not need the whole storm at once. They need a path through it. I called Kate from the driveway and told her we were moving from hypothetical to now. She did not rush me. She walked me through a temporary no-contact request the way you would explain a seatbelt to someone who has never worn one. It does not stop the crash. It keeps you from going through the windshield. We talked about what to document and what to ignore. Save the messages, do not argue. If he shows up, do not open the door. I told my mother we were taking a pause. She asked if she had done something wrong. I told her no, and meant it with a firmness that surprised us both. When Mark found out, he called my phone instead of hers. He started calm and ended sharp. "Do not tear this family apart," he said, like the family was a thing he owned. When I did not respond, he changed tactics. "You think you are better than me now," he said. "You think your desk job gives you power." I said nothing. Then he went where men like him go when they feel the ground shift. "I can ruin your career," he said. "I know people." I saved the voicemail and set the phone face down. That night he posted another photo, this one of a drink sweating on a table with a caption about values and perspective. The contrast was not subtle. Family values on Sunday, yacht stories on Tuesday. I did not point it out. Screenshots do not need commentary. The request for the no-contact order went in the next morning with Kate guiding the language so it stayed clean. Mark sent 3 texts in a row after that, asking for a meeting, then demanding one, then warning me about consequences. I did not reply. Silence is not weakness when it is documented. At church the following Sunday, a woman Linda had known for years stopped me near the coffee urn and asked if everything was all right. Her voice had the careful tilt of gossip pretending to be concern. I said we were taking space. She nodded and said she had heard things. That word is how rumors put on shoes. By Monday, a cousin called to ask if I was getting help. Someone else messaged me a link to an article about stress injuries with a note that said, "Take care of yourself." Mark had started his campaign. Unstable, attention-seeking, PTSD. The words were chosen to sound responsible. I saved each message. At work, nothing changed. That was the point. I showed up. I logged in. I answered emails. I forwarded a question to the right office and got a reply that confirmed the process was moving. No alarms, just doors closing one at a time. I met my mother at the kitchen table and explained the no-contact order in plain language. She worried about what people would say. I told her people talk whether you are quiet or not. We can choose what the paper says. She signed with a hand that shook and then steadied. Mark left a letter in the mailbox addressed to family. He wrote about misunderstanding and pressure and love. He did not apologize. He never asked how she was. He asked for access. We did not open the letter together. I photographed it and put it back. At the base, Reyes asked if the problem was still clean. I said yes. He said keep it that way. A compliance notice came through the same week, routine and unremarkable except for the date. I already knew it. Access does not announce itself. It just shortens the distance. Mark called again, this time softer. He said he missed her. He said people were talking. He said this was embarrassing. I let the call go to voicemail. Linda asked if she should answer him just once. I told her no and held her hand until the question passed. The smear widened. Someone from the church suggested counseling for me. Another hinted that my job made me aggressive. I did not respond. I printed nothing. I saved everything. That was the escalation. Not fists, not shouting, threats to reputation. That is where men like Mark think the real power lives. I checked the account again and saw a hold placed where there had not been one before. Temporary, conditional, real. When Mark realized it, he showed up at the house and knocked hard enough to make the door rattle. Linda did not open it. He yelled about loyalty and sacrifice. I stood behind her and watched the deadbolt hold. Later, he texted me a single line. "You did this. I saved it. If you hate people who use honor as a rumor, subscribe. The price always arrives." Bell County Courthouse has a way of draining sound out of people. The hallway smelled like paper and floor cleaner, and the benches were hard enough to remind you to sit up straight. Mark arrived early, suit-pressed, posture loose with confidence, greeting a clerk by name like this was another place he belonged. He looked around as if expecting deference and found it in the way people made space. I arrived with Linda a few minutes later. Her hand shook when she held the folder, but she held it. I sat beside her and said nothing. That mattered. The mediator called the room to order and asked everyone to take their seats. Mark leaned back as if he owned the table. The mediator glanced down the list, then up. "We will wait for Harper to take her seat." The words landed without emphasis and changed the temperature. Mark froze. It was the first time I had seen him quiet on command. I took the chair opposite him and nodded once. The mediator addressed me with a title that did not explain itself. "Liaison," she said, confirming presence. That was enough. No rank announced, no credentials paraded. Standing established. Linda slid the paperwork across the table and signed where indicated, breath steadying with each stroke. Mark opened his mouth and was stopped by a raised hand. "This is a mediation room," the mediator said. "We proceed in order." The bank compliance representative joined by phone voice, clear tone practiced. "Temporary hold confirmed on joint accounts pending review," she said, effective immediately. Mark objected and was told objections would be noted. The OSAKA travel appeared on the screen as a line item, dates aligned with transfers. Misuse was not shouted, it was circled. The no-contact order was read aloud, brief and exact. Granted, the mediator said effective today. Mark stared at the paper like it had betrayed him. He was asked to produce financial disclosures within a set window. He asked why. The answer was process. The mediator did not argue. She moved to the next item. The mistress was referenced by name in the record through counsel correspondence, her involvement limited to dates and signatures. No theatrics, just ink. Mark tried to laugh and failed. He said this was an overreaction. He said family matters should stay private. The mediator did not look up when she said that privacy ends where safety begins. Linda spoke then only 2 sentences, voice thin and honest. I kept quiet because quiet was cheaper. I am done paying. The room stayed still. The mediator summarized outcomes and closed the session. In the hallway, Mark reached for me and stopped short of touching. "You think you won?" he said. I said nothing. The bank compliance call disconnected. A clerk handed Mark a checklist. He folded it once, then twice, as if creasing could change content. Outside the courthouse steps were slick from a morning rain. Linda breathed like someone learning a new rhythm. If you believe justice can be quiet and still be strong, comment fire. The call came 3 days after the courthouse late afternoon, when the house is quiet enough to hear the refrigerator cycle. Mark did not leave a message the first time. He called again an hour later and then sent a text that said, "We need to talk." I let the phone sit until evening and answered on the 3rd ring, not because I owed him anything, but because patterns matter. He started with a sigh that sounded rehearsed. "You took this too far," he said. "Your mother is weak, and you know that. I was stressed. Anyone would be." He said it like context could cancel conduct. I said nothing. He filled the space with pleading, then shifted to blame. "Linda never handled money well," he said. "I protected her. You turned her against me." He said my name the way people do when they want to sound reasonable. I listened and counted the pivots. When pleading failed, he tried shame. "This looks bad for you," he said. "People talk. You are supposed to be disciplined." He laughed softly and said he could make some calls. I saved the call and said, "Put it in writing." He scoffed and said I was being dramatic. I said, "Talk to the court." He said, "Family should not need courts." I said, "No contact means no contact." He hung up. The next day, he sent an email addressed to family values, copied to no one important, full of language about reconciliation and forgiveness. He did not apologize. He asked for access. I forwarded it to counsel and closed the laptop. Mark showed up at the house anyway and knocked until the neighbor across the street came out. Linda did not open the door. I stood beside her and felt the old instinct to smooth things over fade. He shouted about betrayal and respect. He said he built everything. I recorded the audio and watched the deadbolt hold. Later that week, a letter arrived from a state office requesting additional documentation related to contracting and licensing. It was polite and exact. Mark called again when he realized what it meant. This time his voice was sharp with fear. He tried to dress up as authority. "You think you are smart," he said. "You think paperwork makes you powerful." I said nothing. The inquiry widened on its own timetable. Requests became audits. Audits became reviews. The firm that had always returned his calls started asking for explanations. At church, Mark was asked to step back from the committee until matters were resolved. He called it persecution. The board called it policy. The mistress was not present for any of this. Her name appeared only in records and notices. Her brokerage placed her on leave pending review of signatures and dates that did not line up. A month later, the license suspension letter went public in the dull way these things do, a line in a bulletin no one reads until it matters. Mark sent me a screenshot and wrote, "This is on you." I saved it. He tried again, softer this time. He said he missed Linda. He said he would do counseling. He said the community was judging him unfairly. He did not ask how she was sleeping. He did not ask if she was afraid. He asked when the hold would lift. That was the moment that clarified everything. Control was the only apology he knew how to offer. I replied with 3 sentences and no warmth. Put it in writing. Talk to the court. No contact means no contact. He sent a longer message accusing me of cruelty. I did not read it twice. The state review requested additional files and extended the window. The bank maintained the temporary freeze. The no contact order remained in place. Linda started carrying her own card and learned to read statements line by line. She asked questions and waited for answers. Mark left another letter with a neighbor, this one about faith and endurance. The neighbor returned it unopened. The community shifted the way it does when certainty cracks. Invitations stopped. The handshake line shortened. People who had praised Mark for years learned new routes through the grocery store. None of it was loud, that was the point. Mark called one last time from a number I did not recognize. He said this was not over. He said he would not be destroyed by his own child. I let it go to voicemail and forwarded it. The inquiry continued. The review did not rush. It did not need to. Consequences rarely do. The quiet arrived in pieces rather than all at once. It came with signatures and small decisions that did not need witnesses. Linda opened a new account in her own name and learned how to read statements the way people learn a new language, slowly and without shame. She asked the teller to explain fees and waited for the explanation to finish. She carried a plain envelope home and placed it in a drawer that now had space. We changed the locks on a Saturday morning while the street was still empty, the click of metal clean and final. A fresh key went onto a plain keychain with nothing sentimental attached. It felt lighter that way. I drove back to the unit and slipped into routine like a coat that fits. PT before sunrise. Emails answered in order, a brief that ended on time. Reyes stopped by my desk and said 2 words, "good work," and kept walking. No ceremony, no questions. That was enough. Linda set up a calendar on the fridge and wrote down appointments in careful block letters. Doctor on Tuesday, pharmacy on Friday, church optional. She learned to ask what a form meant and to wait until the answer made sense. I showed her how to keep copies and where to put them. She smiled when she realized she did not need permission to ask. The house changed its sound. The television stayed off more often, doors closed without flinching. On Sunday mornings, a porch light stayed on even after sunrise, not because it was needed, but because it could be. We cooked simple meals and ate without rushing. Linda told stories she had not told before, small ones about jobs she loved and places she wanted to see. I listened and let the quiet hold. I helped her find a community group that offered practical support without speeches. A phone number taped inside a cabinet. A small fund that covered locks and first-month rent when needed. Nothing loud, nothing with our names on it. At work, the review continued at its own pace. I did not track it. I did my job. Systems moved because systems do. Mark did not call again. The mailbox stayed empty of his letters. The community adjusted. People choose calm when it becomes visible. Linda stood a little taller at the grocery store and took her time at the register. On a quiet Sunday morning, sunlight came through the kitchen window and rested on the counter. The porch light was still on. The new key lay on the table, unremarkable and free. I thought about how many years had been spent mistaking endurance for love, how often silence is praised until it costs everything. Some people spend a lifetime confusing endurance with love. If you want more stories like this, stay with the channel.